When we think of early art, we hardly conjure this image of powerful women. And when we do think of women, it's typically in this obedient or almost submissive role. Typically a wife, a daughter, or a sex symbol like a mistress. But tonight, we're gonna dive deep into the narrative that Artemisia Gentileschi changed. Let's understand how Gentileschi adopted the key features of Baroque art while incorporating her own fresh idea of female power. We're going to look at two images. The first one is going to be Susanna and the elders, and the second one, Esther before Arcturus. We're going to start with a more microanalysis, color, lines, medium, and those sorts of things, and then move into a microanalysis, the embedded meaning, or really how this is different at the time and what story this is trying to portray. So let's start with Susanna and the elders. The story is of Susanna, who denies advances of two male judges while she's bathing in a garden. Following the shutdown of their advances, they accuse her of adultery and spreading rumors of her infidelity. When we look at this image, realism is an understatement. The image feels extremely real and extremely tight. Everything is really crammed in, and Gentileschi did that by design, making us almost feel uncomfortable with Susanna. Her body is nude, but it doesn't stand for a sign of eroticism. It's more of a symbol of dignity. The wall also serves a significant point to the story. It acts as a barrier, showing the right and wrong, really dividing the image into two. Placing the men above Susanna, this acts as more of a conviction of power or oppression over Susanna that they hold at the moment. Now, light and color. When we compare the men to Susanna, she seems to almost glow. She is centered, wearing white, compared to the men who are less vibrant and dressed mostly in red. Through this, we once again get this divide of right and wrong, or really truths from lies. This image is painted much differently by Artemisia Gentileschi than other artists. The story is popular, but what is different is Susanna is clearly repulsed by the men's advances when compared to early artwork, where she seems almost submissive and frivolous. Gentileschi makes the story feel real. We can almost hear her grunt of disgust, and thanks to her lines, the body movement feels like she's pushing away. Gentileschi places Susanna as a beacon of truth. The story follows the same pattern, as the accusations were beaten and the men were found guilty. This changes the narrative of previous work, and gives the woman really a spotlight. Now let's look at our next piece. Esther before Osiris. This is a story where Esther, the wife of a king Osiris, appears before him without permission to urge him to stop the massacre of Jewish people. Remember this, because we'll get back to this later. But before the king can make his decision, she faints, causing him to rise and focus his attention on her. When we look at this image, there's a pretty obvious gap between the two. This really heightens the sense of tension within the air. The use of lines also grabs our attention and makes the image seem as if it's unfolding in front of our eyes. It almost feels like Esther is still falling. We could almost feel and see the buckling of her knee and the limpness of her body. We could also see, with the use of lines, that it feels like the king is also moving, almost as if he's pushing out of his seat to address that she is fainting. The movement is amazing, but notable is the light. The tenebrism, which we'll talk about later, dramatizes the image, highlights the paleness of her skin and the elegance of the folds in her dress. As we look at the image, we see Esther's head fall back, arm rise, and her body seem as if she's going to fall to the floor if it wasn't for the help of the servants. She seems powerless, but it's actually quite the contrary. Esther appears before him without permission, which is subject to death back then. Crazy. She was under immense pressure and likely uses her position as the king's wife to manipulate and control the king's decisions. To understand the story is to understand the woman sacrificed everything for what she believed in and continued to soften the king's prosecution of the Jewish people. Gentileschi drew Esther as an agent of action and justice. What we see within Gentileschi's work is the realness. What other male artists fail to incorporate is the trueness of their emotions and physical stature of a woman. She appears pale, stressed, and faints as a result. It's realistic, with zero filters. She's not a goddess, but what she is a woman standing up for herself and those she cares about. This isn't an easy task, but the display of confidence and courage is profound. Artemisia Gentileschi lived in a time when painting wasn't really an option for women. She forged her way into the industry built against her and managed to truly express herself the way she wanted to, and it's apparent in her work. She managed to adopt the techniques of artists and the theme of the Baroque, but added her truth to the stories. When we look at most of her work, it's female driving and showing some sort of realism when it comes to the story being told. She didn't just make this art, she felt it, and that's a disconnect many male artists had. They can paint women, but the question is, do they know the experiences? Emotionally, physically, expressively? They didn't have the experiences, and only drew what they could perceive. Artemisia Gentileschi made her life translate into a paintbrush and oil. And now we get these deep pieces that will forever be acclaimed.